And now moving into our discussion, getting married is not only an emotional commitment, but it entails a lifelong commitment to merge lives, sharing assets and parenting your children. Ending a marriage through divorce also has lifelong consequences, both legal and financial, as well as consequences for any children of the marriage. Divorce is becoming a trend in Africa. What happened to African culture where divorce was forbidden and shameful? Is it fair to walk away with 50% of your partner's fortune if you came in with nothing in your marriage? And when you have children, you can be faced with child custody battles and child support. Now joining me in studio is Joey Ramoeret, a life coach, to unpack the implications of divorce. A very warm welcome to you, sir, and thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, good evening and welcome to the viewers at home.
And now, when divorce takes place, what are some of the implications that could face the couple? As we know that a marriage has a contract, and there are some of those rules that you need to adhere to when it comes to that marriage contract.
Marriage is actually, it does not have to have rules, because marriage is an agreement between two people that ended up not agreeing. That is why it led to divorce. But let's look at where marriage starts and where divorce starts and marriage ends. And I always say to people, excitement is the cause of the divorce and the breakup of relationships. When two people meet at the beginning, they don't ask questions. When the one proposes love to the other one agrees. But there are questions that you need to ask. You need to ask yourself, where am I going to? It's like jumping into a bus and then you don't ask where the bus is going to. And when the bus is going a different direction, what happens? You fight with the driver. Now, exactly with the marriage. A lot of people will go into marriage and end up divorcing because they feel as if whatever they invested in the marriage, they are shortchanged. Because when you go into a marriage, it's a sort of an investment. You don't only invest in assets, but you are investing your love, your emotions, everything. You give everything up. And then when it comes to the divorce, I think the law should leave that to the two people to agree. That is why in South Africa, before people go to a divorce court, first they need to present what we call a divorce settlement, which the two of them agree on to say, take this and then I'll take that. But that's not the end, and that's the beginning of depression. That's the beginning of bitterness, frustration, and where you find kids. Now, it goes to an extent of kids buying into a marriage, yet they are not married, and they end up going into drugs because now, they feel as if they failed. Sometimes the kids buy into this thing. So marriage actually destroys families, and it destroys lives. It destroys the future. And unfortunately, it can be dealt with from the beginning. Like, for instance, let's go into dating. What is dating? First, you ask yourself, there's a difference between dating, relationship, and marriage. There are things that, in dating, number one, you're only there, it's a meeting. People need to get this clear. It's a meeting where you are being given the opportunity to talk about yourself, ask questions before you go into a relationship. And a lot of people, they don't go into that step. They don't ask questions because of excitement. They end up, thinking, like, we are tired. Do you understand? And from there, they will decide depending on how they feel. And that's where the problem comes in. You need to ask questions. Who are you? What is it that you want in my life? What is it that God wants me to do for you? Because we all have got roles to play. And some of us, people go into a divorce because now they're missing a mark. I always talk about the mark. A lot of people will look at the wants of a partner, but the most important is not the wants. The most important at this stage is the needs. You hear people talking about she does not appreciate, he does not appreciate. I'm doing that, I'm buying cars, I'm buying groceries, I'm taking care of them. But how do you know that you are actually, doing the right thing? And those are the things that leads to divorce. Now, here is one example that I'll give you. People meet, come together, they agree on a marriage. Before you get married, I would say people must go for a premarital counseling.
Now, I understand that off air you had said that you hate divorce.
I hate divorce because people are divorcing for wrong reasons, because they got married to wrong people. They never ask questions. I've been married for 31 years. You know, there's a time where I said to my wife, you are actually a project, but you are an unending project. Meaning that I told myself that when I go into her life, she's got a role to play. And when I went into her life, I had a role to play. So we end up being like, it's a project. We are there, you know, in that space to play certain roles in other people's lives. And that is why I say I hate divorce. Not to say I never had challenges. I had challenges. And I'm telling you, I took all the challenges. To me, the challenges were like an eye-opener. You won't know a person at the beginning of a relationship. Obviously, there are going to be conflicts. But conflicts in a relationship or conflicts in a marriage, it does not mean a battle. You are not fighting. You are not enemies, but you are there to learn. Imagine you getting married and then for 10 years, people will tell you, I'm blessed in my marriage. Yet they don't want to go into an argument, into a conflict. I welcome conflicts because the conflict, it makes me to know you better. That is why they say they became one. You don't become one when your pastor blesses you. You become one as you narrow the gap between the two of you.
And looking at some of the challenges that you said you went through, how can one try and overcome those challenges? Because it seems as if most people don't understand if you have challenges, you can avoid divorce.
Challenges or conflicts in a marriage, they don't make people to separate. They make you to understand. You just mentioned one word. How do you make the other person to understand? It's all about understanding your partner. Like, for instance, the needs of your partner. Let's say, for instance, in the dating, you sit there, you talk, you ask questions. Most people, they don't go into marriage because they want a husband. Some want a mother figure out of the wife. Some want a father figure out of that relationship. Now we've got fatherless kids. Now, when you ask the right questions at the beginning of the relationship, who are you? Tell me about yourself. And immediately when your partner's, you know, your partner to be starts telling you about her upbringing or his upbringing, that's where you listen. People don't listen. If you listen, you'll be able to know what is my role in this person's life. But if we don't ask those questions, we are just going to generalize. And that's where the mistake comes in. That's where now we're talking about Kenya, where people are talking about 50%. There is no 50%. If my wife wakes up tomorrow and say, let's divorce, I'll consider my kids first because I know what is going to happen to them. I'll consider her as well. Remember, there are people who cannot take divorce lightly. There are people who go into depression. There are people who cannot sleep. Why? Because the partner was selfish. When you started in the beginning, you were not selfish. You wanted to be together. You wanted to be an item. Now, why must some people will ask for the 50% just to cause pain into the other person?
Now, I want us to invite Advocate Mashudu Chivase. Thank you so much for joining us here into this conversation where we're busy trying to unpack the implications of divorce. But now we want to understand the legal side of divorce. What are some of those implications that couples will go through? Advocate, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, Advocate.
Evening,
yes.
Mr. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
And also evening to the viewers at home. Yeah, on the implication of divorce. Firstly, it depends and to which matrimonial system did the parties concluded when they get married. You've got a marriage in community of property, where the parties agree that we are going to share the common estate. In essence, it means that at the time of the dissolution of the marriage, the parties will share what we normally call 50-50 of the joint estate. And then you have a marriage where the party conclude what you called an anti-nuptial contract with the exclusion of the accrual system, loss and profit. That means that, at the time of the divorce, each party, actually during the marriage, let me start there. During the marriage, each and every party among the two, the estate, whatever they build during the marriage, it belongs to that individual partner. And during the divorce, there is no sharing of the estate. But however, there is something which we call, which normally happen in practice. You find that the wife has not, which is normally what we normally encounter in practice. You find that the wife did not necessarily contribute or did not build the estate enough of herself during the marriage. And however, there are contributions which might have made indirectly, giving the husband the support, looking after the family and so forth. During the divorce, the wife normally will institute a proceeding for what we call the rehabilitation maintenance. It means that there is a particular period of time where she would be, the court will order, after the court have considered all the surrounding circumstances which she will present. It's not an automatic. She has to make out the case in court that she is entitled to rehabilitative maintenance. And then the court will award. Sometimes they can award for a period of 12 months, depending, because the case they differs. Or sometimes the court can say, no, she is entitled to maintenance until a particular period, or until she's able to sustain herself. So, and then you have the third one, where there is it's out of communal property, but with the accrual system. So it means that when you get into the marriage, what you have, but at the time of the dissolution of the marriage, what will happen is the court will calculate as to, in terms of trying to balance, to say that even though you are married out of commit of property, but there is an accrual system where we need to balance that. During the marriage, as the husband has been able to build an estate to this particular level, and the wife was not able to build the estate at all, then there will be the balancing of equation, if I may put so. So that is what the effect. Those are some of the effect of divorce. Then it comes to the issue. Let's say, for instance, the wife, in the initial case, whether irrespective of whatever matrimonial regime they are married into, at the time when the wife or the husband institute divorce proceeding, if the wife was not employed, because normally the parties will separate, she will institute proceeding which we call Rule 43. Rule 43 is what is called maintenance penalty. It means that it's a maintenance pending the divorce proceedings. It means that the husband will be maintaining the wife up until the divorce proceeding is finalized. Because you find that sometimes, I get married and I say to my wife, no, you don't have to work, I'll look after you. And when I decide to divorce her, I tell her to, you move out of the property, you will see how to finish. So the law has designed Rule 43 in order to protect the women who are faced in the example which I've just given. So the husband will be ordered to contribute maintenance as well as contribution towards cost. because, you know, divorce proceedings, there are lawyers involved. It's a very lengthy and an emotional and a straining process. So the court tried to balance, to say that let the levels field be equal. Because if you are a rich husband is married to a very vulnerable poor woman, he will take advantage and use the money to fight the legal battles and make sure that she doesn't get anything.
Yes, Advocate, I'm going to come back to that discussion because I want to bring in another story that is making headlines across the African continent, where Kenya court rejects a plea for equal property rights in divorce, which is something that you have touched on. Now, we know that a Kenyan court on Monday rejected a plea for a change to the laws on how property should be split in divorce cases, a ruling activists said was a blow for women's rights in the country. Kenya's High Court dismissed a 2016 petition from the Federation of Women Lawyers in Kenya, FIDA, an advocacy group that had argued the Marriage Properties Act was unconstitutional because it entitled each partner only to what they contributed. Now, the Constitution states that married couples are entitled to equal rights, and the group argued that the law unfairly impacted women who were more likely to suffer financially from a marriage breakup. In its ruling, the court said that changing the law would open the door for a party to get into marriage and walk out of it in the event of divorce with more than they deserve. Now, joining us over the phone line is Francis Mutenji, a Kenyan journalist. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, we just wanted to find out, what have Kenyans said about this ruling that has been made?
Well, thank you very much. I want to believe that from the arguments of the two other guests who have spoken earlier, there is a clear indication that the trend is not any different in many African countries. It is a situation that many nations, and for that matter, many lawyers and many courts will be struggling with, both customarily as well as religious and other come-with-stay kind of arrangements in marriage in Africa. But basically, what Justice Mativo in Kenya said is that this was likely to be a major gold-digging opportunity. So the gold diggers basically were considered the losers here because it was seen as an opportunity to create a channel through which more people can walk out of their marriages purely because they know they are just about to benefit from half of the estate of their spouse. And in this context, therefore, the gold diggers in marriage were the losers. At the same time, the argument that the judge had was there is a probability that a lady, for example, or a gentleman may enter into marriage very keen, setting up their goal to walk out in a few months along the distance, just to get the half of the portion that the other spouse will be having. In this case, therefore, the gold digger winning the battle. And then the argument that has been in the streets among Kenyans, for example, those who believe in religious marriages, whether Muslim or Christian for that matter, or even customary marriages, whether polygamous or single man-wife case, that is customary. I mean, one wife or one husband case. The argument has been, why would you be thinking of sharing 50-50 when this marriage is dissolved or marriage is coming to an end through a divorce? If at all, you're getting into a marriage in the context of believing that marriage is a long-lasting institution. So in this case, therefore, if you get into a marriage and you're thinking already how we are going to share when we separate, it means that it's no longer a reliable marriage, because marriage is about people coming together for worse or for good, for sickness or for health, and therefore live long together. As much as there may be trouble or may be happiness, you're ready to stay long through the distance until death do you part. In this context, therefore, there will be no reason to start sharing. But the judge also said, according to the Kenyan Matrimonial Property Act of 2013, which came into force in January 2014, the argument was that actually it was 2003 Act said that contribution into the marriage will be considered when you're deciding whenever there is a dissolution or divorce in a marriage, so that the contribution each member made is what is going to be their portion during the marriage, is what is going to be shared equally. What came as a prenuptial acquisition, that is whatever was acquired before the marriage or in the agreement before the marriage, is what is going to be considered. But whenever there is no such prenuptial agreement, then it means that the law will apply in the context of contribution. If you came into the marriage and you found me owning 3 cars, those cars will belong to me. If you came into the marriage and drove in with your 3 cars, those cars will belong to you. In that case, therefore, there will be no equal sharing of property. But the Law Society, the FIDA female lawyers were looking for an opportunity to say this law is illegal and therefore should be overruled and bring in the context of sharing 50-50, which the judge said is going to create an opportunity for gold diggers to drive.
Now, Francis, I was just wondering, I'm just going to cut in there, sorry about that. I was wondering, the Federation of Women Lawyers in Kenya, were you able to talk to them to actually find out that now that their petition has been dismissed by the High Court, what is the way forward now in Kenya?
Well, the way forward is that the law will continue as is, because the judge basically state their request to overrule that law or that act that was passed in 2003, and say that as things are, that law or that act shall apply, so that the contribution that you made into the marriage is what you shall get as your portion. However, it is also appropriate to realize that the same matrimonial property act defines contribution as anything that you bring, including child care, including even companionship, is considered as contribution. But when it comes to property that is physical, because contribution in this case can be monetary or non-monetary according to that property act, is that whatever you brought in is what you'll get. Whatever you found me with shall be mine, unless there was a prenuptial agreement.
Thank you very much, Francis, for joining us. Thank you so much for those details. That was Francis Muteji, Kenya journalist, just giving us more details. I'm going to bring this conversation back into studio. Now, we did hear advocate talking about a housewife that usually they don't get much, because once they have come into the marriage agreement, they come in with nothing, but all they can do is just assist when it comes to household duties. Now, when we look at that, we know that there is also a Rule 43 that he spoke about that protects housewives. Do you think that it's still effective when you look at divorce cases in Africa so far?
Then we are not talking about marriage in this case. We're talking about gold diggers. There's a difference between marriage and somebody who goes into, marriage for, looking at their own interest. That is why in the beginning I said, when you start dating, the questions that you ask, we need to ask ourselves in actual fact. You don't ask the next person, why am I in your life? What is it? What is my role in your life? What is it that God wants me to do for you? Those are the questions that I ask myself. But immediately when I ask you, what do you want? What are you going to do for me? Obviously, people will paint themselves good, but the intentions you are not going to know until they go to the divorce court. Now, the question is, what is marriage? Are we talking about marriage, or are we talking about, more especially now with the latest trend whereby ladies are now coming on top? You'll find men that are gold diggers that go into marriage because they are looking at their own interest. But when we talk about reality and the real marriage, it's about two people coming. I believe strongly in God to say God creates balances. When I come into your life, I've got a role to play in your life, but I am not there to take from you. But if we've got people who come into our lives to come and take, that's when the government will come with rules. I mean, what makes the women from Kenya to come up with this and say, they're talking about domestic, housewives. We're not talking about housewives. We're talking about us being equal in a marriage. Whatever it's mine, it's yours. And my pain is your pain. That's what we're going through.
Let me bring Advocate Mashudu back into this conversation. Now, we were talking about the Kenyan court that had rejected a plea for change to the laws on how a property should be split in divorce cases. I wanted to find out, what is your reaction to what the Kenyan court had said with this ruling?
Okay, thanks, Elisiko. What I'll start with, maybe, you know, our legal system has developed drastically over the years. If you look at our Matrimonial Property Act of 1988, what it has done, I'll start there and I'll tell you why. What it has done is that it has come and introduced something which called the abolishment of husband powers, which used to, in the past, used to be the case where the husband will always be having an upper hand in the marriage. So, and that effect on the impact on the how the property system and so forth are managed. Fast forward, our Constitution, Act 108 of 1996. In this regard, I'll refer you to Section 9, which guarantee equality. And I'm saying that everyone, in terms of our legal system, is equal before the law. And that is why, you know, immediately after the Constitution came into effect, you know that it was around the interim Constitution in 1993 up to the subsequent, the final Constitution. The issue of 50-50 started. And that 50-50 was because it was guaranteeing that everyone is equal before the law.
Now, Advocate, I'm going to just come back to you. We do have a caller on the line who also wants to share their comment. We have Fidel from Germiston. Thank you so much for joining us. What is your comment or question this evening?
Ladies and gentlemen, madam, I just want to comment, you know, like what my brother said earlier on. Are you there?
Yes.
Like what my brother in Kenya said earlier on, you know, we're talking about something, you know, when family, you know, there's some ladies, when they come into a man's life, the lady will come mostly fake. There's a lot of women that they're living a fake life, and they come into a man's life, living a fake life, hiding their identity, knowing that they are not coming there in relationship, knowing that they're coming for one thing or the other. For example, if the man is hardworking, or if the man is rich, or if the men have what they want, you know. And you guys must know this. So many people are getting killed by, you know, relationship when it comes to fake life issue and relationship whereby gold diggers, like my brother in Kenya said. So many people are getting killed. So many people are getting ripped off by, you know, doing this, you know, is the way it's not supposed to do. Like women, most of them are the women who don't have a family background. Most of them are the women who their parents did not give them whole training. Because when, like my father and the Lord there, the old man was saying, when you grow up from a family who got a principal and they give you home training, I'm talking about ladies, you're not coming to a man's life to be a partaker of maybe one way or the other to rape that man off, or have something in mind to, you know, to destroy the marriage.
Fidel, thank you so much for calling in. I'm going to pose this one to Joey Ramoire, a life coach, to unpack this for us.
It is true. This is reality. People come into other people's lives because wherever they come from, maybe they were not properly taken care of. And they are using those that are in their lives to pick them up and for them to be where they wanted to be all along. That is why all the killings. And unfortunately, when it comes to divorce, there are people who don't even go to the divorce court. They are eliminated before the divorce. Now, these are the problems, and this is when we come to divorce. That's why my earlier question was, are we talking marriage? Are we talking people who come into our lives using you as a stepladder? Do you understand? But nonetheless, let's look at the consequences. Who suffers? The kids suffer. You might not know unless you ask the right questions. I'll go back. During dating, did you ask yourself, what is my role? What is my role in this man's life? Do you understand? And then out of that one, commitment will come out from you, knowing your role in that person's life. But if people meet in clubs, more especially now, people meet in clubs. They meet everywhere. They meet where there's excitement. You know, they don't ask the questions. And some of the things, it's not about material things. It's not about what you accumulate. It's not about what people need. People's needs differ in marriage. There are those who just come in and just to be loved. Do you understand? To come back home to a warm home. Some are there for a lifestyle. And people are getting married for different reasons. And the needs differ. The wants are the same. So here in this type of marriage, we're talking of the wants. When people come and say, will he take care of me? Will he buy me clothes?
Let me invite Advocate into this conversation. Now, we understand that there are obviously different reasons for marriage, as we have heard from Joey. Looking at it from a legal perspective and looking at what some of the callers have also said, that it seems as if most relationships is actually based on gold diggers. What can you give me? What can I get out of this relationship in terms of material things? Looking at legally, how does one get away from this when it comes to cases of divorce being brought at court? How does one deal with such, Advocate?
Okay, Lisiko, you know, maybe what I want to explain first to you is that in our legal system, marriage is a contract. It's a contract which the two parties agree that we are getting married together. And in the process, our legal system has given them choice. It's either they get married in terms of, because even our customary marriages are recognized, you know, in terms of the recognition of Customary Marriages Act. If we want to do our marriage under that act, we contract ourselves, and in that particular regard, is two families coming together, and there has to be all the celebration, handing over of the bride, and so forth. The second contract which they can agree on is marriage in common of property. The third one is marriage. The ones which I've initially explained. So our legal system give the parties, before they get into the marriage, to say that if you want to contract yourself into a marriage, you have a choice. Choose which marital system you want to conclude, the two of you, and therefore it gives you the consequences of what will therefore happen in the event of the dissolution of that particular marriage. So the parties knows at the time when they entered into this contract, the contract.
Advocate, let me just bring in a viewer at home also wants to share their views. We have Anonymous from Northwest. What is your comment or question this evening?
I just wanted to check. Just want to know what should a person do? The partners are in separation.
All right. Thank you, Anonymous. We will get to that question of yours. We also have Jonas calling from Soweto.
I'm not done. I'm not done.
Unfortunately, running out of time. Sorry, Anonymous. We have Jonas joining us from Soweto. Jonas, what is your comment or question this evening? All right, it seems as if we have lost our caller, but now it seems as if we're going to be wrapping up. But what are your last words for this conversation that we're having?
My last words are, people must not allow their feelings to drive them to take decisions. Secondly, it's people that come into our lives, you need to go through them with a fine comb, understand them. Some of us, it's not about money, it's not about material things, it's about the emotions. You know, what I get from you, money cannot buy that. But when it comes to divorce, all those material things are involved. There are people who will say, I only want myself. Take everything. I am happy. Do you understand? They are happy to be free. Now, there are those people who are like that. But now, before people, I would say on closure, before people go and sign, they need to go through all the marital contracts to check accrual, all those, to find out. But it will be unfair as well to say, why must I prepare myself for exit when I'm going in?
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you
Thanks,
very
Lisa.
much. That was Joey Ramoire, a life coach, to unpack the implications of divorce. And we also had over the phone line Francis Muteji, Kenyan journalist, giving us some more details on a Kenyan court which rejected a plea for a change to the laws on how property should be split in divorce cases. We also had advocate Mashudu Chibase giving us legal advice. Thank you so much for watching. Right now, we'll take a short break. We'll be back with more news and updates. Stay tuned.